having something like yoga as a system and a methodology that brings tools into your life to deal with that stuff, I think is a major benefit. And someone like Patanjali, who 2,000 years ago put this system together for all of us, I think is a blessing. The Yoga Connection with Zorananda is a deep dive into the world of yoga, exploring the rich history of tradition, methodology, and practices both ancient and modern. Follow along as yoga is explored through solo episodes to guest interviews to understand its vast reach around the world. Hello and welcome to the Yoga Connection. My name is Zorananda. Today marks the 50th episode of this podcast, which is a bit of a milestone for me. I've been kind of all over the place with this thing, doing my best to be consistent, where technically if I have been doing this every week, every month for the last 3 years, I would have about 150 episodes. But we got to do what we got to do and got to live my life, and here we are. And so I'm happy to continue doing this thing and getting episodes out there. And today I am introducing a pretty big topic that's going to span 16 episodes. That doesn't necessarily mean that from today on I'm going to be talking about this topic every week. I have some guests lined up, so I'm going to throw in some interviews here and there, but as a single topic, it's going to span quite a few episodes leading up to the end of the year, which I'm excited about. As you may have heard in the past, I've done episodes on the chakras, the koshas, the pranavayu, so I've kind of dived into the energetic system. And now I want to go into Ashtanga yoga and what really Ashtanga yoga is. So the first thing that I want to cover is a clarification of what Ashtanga yoga is. The typical experience of Ashtanga is through a fellow named Pattabhi Jois, who came to America back in the 50s and brought with him his Ashtanga yoga series, which is composed of 4 levels that get progressively more difficult and intense. But that's not the Ashtanga yoga that I'm talking about here. Pattabhi Jois's Ashtanga yoga was primarily introduced to the West as a method of yoga that could appeal to the Western mind. It is specifically designed to be popular and spread vast and quickly. It's a part of a triad of yoga that was brought over to the United States and Canada in the 1950s and 1970s. Pattabhi Jois and BKS Iyengar brought over their yoga sequences through the guidance of their teacher, Krishnamacharya. Then later, Bikram brought over his sequence in the 1970s. These 3 yoga practices were and are specifically rooted in developing physical results like strength and flexibility. What these practices did for Pattabhi Jois, Iyengar, and Bikram is make a lot of money. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about the real Ashtanga yoga. Ashtanga yoga was first found in a book called Yoga Karunta, written by Vamana Rishi. And just a little disclaimer, there's going to be some Sanskrit names and Sanskrit terms. So you just got to bear with me here, and I'm going to translate the best that I can. So Patanjali compiled the writings from Vamana Rishi and from the Yoga Karunta into a systematic way of understanding Ashtanga yoga way back in 200 BCE. So that's 2,000 years ago. And so what is Ashtanga yoga? Ashtanga quite literally means 8 limbs. So you have Ash, which is the number 8, and Tanga, which is limbs. Then you have yoga, which means unity. So then Ashtanga yoga means the unity of 8 limbs, or the 8 limbs of unity. And those 8 limbs are the yamas, the niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And the translations of those is yama are the don'ts of morality and ethics, and the niyamas are kind of the do's of the morals and ethics in accordance to living a spiritual life and kind of preparing for a spiritual life. Asana literally means seat, as in the seat of your posture. It can move into the realm of posturing, right? So when you look at a yoga sequence and you look at the asanas in the yoga practice, the asanas are the postures, but it more accurately means seat. Pranayama means like breath control, but prana is life force, and it shares that that suffix yama. So if we were to look at the first word, yama means restraint, and so pranayama is like life force restraint. So restraint is used in this context as a means of control. So you're controlling your life force, and pranayama is usually tied to breath work. So it's the restraint of life force through the breath and how you use your breath to control your life force. Pratyahara means sense withdrawal. Dharana means focus or concentration. Dhyana is the first introduction into meditation, but meditation isn't really the right word. Meditation was kind of adopted into understanding or kind of clarifying dhyana, but dhyana is more of the first stage of absolving and dissolving and going into the first stages of, I would say, like enlightenment, which is the last limb, samadhi. So the realm of dharana, dhyana, samadhi, they kind of package together as what meditation would be. But in our typical understanding of meditation, it's kind of a misrepresentation of what actual dharana, dhyana, samadhi are, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But for now, what this whole episode is about is just to introduce these 8 limbs, because in the subsequent episodes, I'm going to be actually diving right into each one individually. So we'll have a whole episode about the yamas, a whole episode about the niyamas, a whole episode about asana, pranayama, pratyahara. And what I mean by whole episodes about the yamas, the yamas and the niyamas, they each have 5 elements to them. And so the yamas are broken down into ahimsa, satya, asteya, aparigraha, and brahmacharya. And what those mean is ahimsa is non-harm, satya is truthfulness, asteya is it's like on the tip of my tongue. I'm gonna have to look this up. I don't want to edit anything. I just realized that I forgot to friggin' write those things down. So I'm gonna in real time look this up because I don't think I drank enough coffee. Yeah, here we go. So yes, the yamas: ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. And so, like I was saying, ahimsa is non-harm, satya is truthfulness, asteya is non-stealing, brahmacharya is abstinence or celibacy. What I like here in this website that I found, they say right use of energy, and aparigraha is non-grasping. So parigraha or graha is the hoarding part, and apari is like the negation of it. And so then we have the niyamas, which are saucha, santosha, tapas, svadhyaya, ishvari, pranidhana. Saucha means cleanliness. Santosha means contentment. Tapas is discipline or burning of the karma. It has to do with like committing yourself to something to overcome this this habitual pattern, right? So say, for example, you're a smoker and you don't want to smoke anymore. And so a tapas would be that you quit smoking, and then you commit to the quit smoking, and then you are burning away the karma that you developed from the years of smoking. So svadhyaya is self-study. Ishvar pranidhana means surrender to the Lord. Ishvara is the Lord, and then pranidhana is like surrendering or giving into a higher being, a higher power, your higher self, God, whatever you want to call it. So what I find in the Ashtanga yoga practice as something that you uphold as a daily thing kind of off of your mat. The yamas and the niyamas, I think, are the kind of most important staple. The asana practice and the pranayama practice and the last limbs are the elements that's going to take you deeper into yourself when you're alone. And the yamas and niyamas are going to be the elements that are going to take you deeper into how you are interacting with society, right? Because these elements or these like morals and ethics are more to do with how you're showing up, right? Say for ahimsa, non-harm, how are you showing up in a way that you're not harming yourself, you're not harming people? And then with satya, with truthfulness, how are you going about not lying to yourself, not lying to others? Asteya, non-stealing. So and non-hoarding with a parigraha. The brahmacharya one is a little bit tricky because it has to do with a more subtle aspect of awareness and observance. So it's not only about celibacy, and that may be difficult to kind of comprehend in why you'd want to take on a practice of celibacy, especially in a world, and especially in the Western world where there's a lot of societal norms about sexual liberation and being free and having and wanting to have boyfriends and girlfriends and whatever, right? And so when I look at the yamas and I kind of aim to put them to practice, the ones that are the staples, I think, of experience are ahimsa, satya, and asteya. So non-harm, truthfulness, and non-stealing, because those are things that we're kind of taught in our life anyways, right? We're told by our parents that we shouldn't be hurtful, we should tell the truth, and that we shouldn't steal. And then to a degree as well, parigraha, for non-greed and non-hoarding, that, we should be kind of generous with ourselves when it comes to saying being charitable, sharing, right? When we're kids, it's like sharing is caring. We want to share with the ones around us, which then the kind of contradiction in brahmacharya, in the right use of energy and celibacy, is that it enters into a realm where you aren't so giving, and you kind of hold back from things, right? So you're kind of then looking at your energy and how you're giving to others, and that you kind of have to rein things in. So it gets a little bit tricky. And so this is why I'm here, because I've spent the last almost 14 years getting into this stuff, and I've dived into these yamas and niyamas as practices, where I've been vegetarian for 6 years, and I really looked at, like, what does it mean to not consume animals? And then I've taken on practices of brahmacharya and celibacy. I've taken on practices of aparigraha and these, and especially when you get into then the niyamas, that especially something like svadhyaya, self-study and the study of text, is that when it comes to having a yoga practice, there are levels to it. Say, I think the typical experience of this is you're an athlete, or you're a gymnast, or you're like a cyclist or a runner, and you hurt yourself, and then you're going through physiotherapy, and your doctor and your physiotherapist go, oh, you should go do yoga because it's helpful to move your body in this particular way, and you can stretch things out, and you can gain a certain kind of strength and flexibility. And then you start going to a yoga class, and you really like it. And then after, about a few months, maybe 6 months or a year, you have a favorite teacher, and then that teacher starts doing workshops, and then you start going to their workshops, and then that teacher puts on a retreat, and you go on a retreat, and then there's a yoga teacher training, and then you find yourself making this huge shift that's taken maybe like a 2 or 3 years, from being this athlete who injured themselves to now potentially being a yoga teacher. And that's kind of typical of the pathway of entering into yoga, where you are in this kind of surface level of practice at first, where you're just going to a yoga class, you're getting a stretch. You find some things kind of weird, like the teacher might say namaste, the teacher might talk about some philosophical stuff, might chant om, but you kind of ignore those things, and you go, I don't really care about that stuff. I'm just here to, stretch my body out. My doctor says it's helpful. I'm finding I'm losing weight. I'm getting, healing my injuries and whatever. To then the next levels, where something clicks inside of you, where you get introduced to a way of examining yourself. And this is where the svadhyaya comes into play, where you're not just doing yoga anymore as just a surface thing of stretching. You're starting to understand why your body moves the way that it does. You're starting to understand why you have the tension where you do. And you start learning new concepts like stored emotions. What does that mean? What does that mean that when you go into a particular posture, and your muscles and connective tissues and your hips and your joints and whatever start to open up, and they start to release, that suddenly you start feeling emotions. You start feeling agitation and sadness and anger, and you're like, where is this stuff coming from? And then the more you dive into it and the more you examine it, you start to see and feel and react to memories and emotions that have been stored for years. And there's this aha moment that happens where you do feel liberated from the stuff that's being stored. And there is a science to this. And this is where I really try to explain to people that yoga is more of a science than it is a religion. There are ritualistic elements to the yoga practice that come from India, but yoga itself as a methodology and a system to examine yourself is more on the side of a scientific approach, because there are hypotheses and theories that are utilized to understand how certain variables that are put together, say, and the variables are what kind of movements, what kind of breath work, what kind of mantras, what kind of focus leads to something. So there's this part of the practice plus this plus this plus this equals this. And what is the equal at the end? What is the question mark? Is a certain level of self-realization where you are realizing something about yourself through the total package of what you're moving through. And so seeing it as a science, you can start to look at Ashtanga yoga as a systematic methodology that will lead you to having particular realizations about you personally. And this is not something that anybody can tell you, not even me. I can't tell you what you're going to realize about yourself through this practice. What I can do is I can tell you about my experiences and my realizations about who I am as a person and how I was able to make particular changes so that my experience of life is more holistic, and so that I'm not caught in any patterns that will perpetuate a certain kind of negativity around the way that society is. Like, look at everything that's happening in our world, right? There's a lot of seemingly overt chaos, right? If it's political, if it's religious, if it's ecological, if it's economical, there are so many things out of our control that seem to be spiraling. And we have now the internet and technology to inform us about all these things on the minute, every second. And it can be really overwhelming. So having something like yoga as a system and a methodology that brings tools into your life to deal with that stuff, I think is a major benefit. And someone like Patanjali, who 2,000 years ago put this system together for all of us, I think is a blessing. And so to see all these things in place of the yamas and the niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, and to look at them as tools and say, okay, now when I study this stuff and then when I put it to practice, what can happen? And if we can examine these practices and these tools in a way where we don't let the judgments and the misconstrued perceptions of what yoga is to affect us, then we can utilize these tools in a way where we can really amplify our own self-awareness. Because when we look at the yamas and niyamas and we go through each one and we start to make sense of them in a way where it's like ahimsa, non-harm. Duh, I don't want to harm people. I don't want to harm myself. So what does that look like, right? In my life of not harming myself overtly, not harming others overtly, then going into satya and truthfulness. What does being truthful do? How does that affect me? How does that affect others? Likewise with Ashtanga and non-stealing, likewise with brahmacharya and being and understanding the right use of your energy, aparigraha and non-greed and non-hoarding, and then into saucha, cleanliness. How am I a clean person internally and externally? Santosha and contentment, how am I content with my life? Tapas, how am I disciplined? How am I taking on commitments that are going to help clear away patterns and tendencies of my karmas? Svadhyaya, how am I studying myself through all this? And then Ishvari Pranidhana, how am I surrendering to something greater to myself? So when I have a dream or a goal, something that's so big that our physical mind just cannot comprehend fully what the big picture is, to go, you know what? I have this vision of myself. For example, I'm a musician, right? I just finished recording, mixing, and mastering 5 songs. And I have a pretty big vision for what I want to do. And how that manifests, I've got to give that up to something greater than myself that has the capacity to put together what it's going to look like for me to not only release this music, but to play shows, not even play shows, to open for a bigger band, to maybe headline one day. And so I don't need the control of those things in my hands, and I can give that up to something greater. And so that's just the yamas and niyamas. And then when I look at the asanas and the pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, now I'm formulating a package. So then when I'm looking at now asana, okay, spending time with my body, that's what the asana practice is that you're sitting down, you're stretching, you're moving, you're getting into tension and tightness and scar tissue of old injuries. And that element of svadhyaya is always there in self-examination and self-study. You're studying yourself really literally through the asana practice. And the thing that really bugs me in the New Age world and in the religious world is this whole thing that yoga is demonic and that the movements are posturing towards these like demonic entities. And the contradiction in this is so stark, where there are so many Christians who go to yoga and they're like, oh, I'm just going to stretch. And they have no problem stretching. But then when it comes to understanding what is happening fundamentally and energetically, it's then shifted into this narrative that, oh, I can't go any deeper into what's happening in this yoga thing because then it's demonic possession. And so what I feel like in these situations, what my job is to take yoga out of the realm of religion and to bring it into the realm of science. And that, scientifically speaking, when you live a sedentary life, okay, where you don't exercise, you don't really move around, the most movement that you're doing is walking to and from places in short distances. If it's like from your house to your car, from your car to the grocery store, just you have very minimal movement, and the movement that you do is just to fulfill a very specific purpose, where then you introduce a way of movement that is atypical to your life. And what I mean by that is that it's not just about fulfilling a particular need, right? Because that's how most of us get around. We are getting around because we want to fulfill a need of, I need to go eat somewhere. I need to go meet up with this person. I need to go get this. I need to go do that. I need to go to work. I need to, it's all about fulfilling needs, where then to sit And to do a yoga practice has nothing to do with fulfilling any needs. And I think that's why a lot of people think that it's a waste of time, because it's not desire based. It's not, I need to sit on my mat because of this. I need to do this practice because of this. You completely eliminate need. It's not about needs or wants. You are entering into a whole new experience of what it means to move your body. So you're just simply rolling out your mat, sitting down, moving your spine, side bending, doing stretches here and there, and you're just moving your body to move your body. And that's hard for people because it starts to show you what you've done to your body just out of ignorance, and not in a negative way. I'm not using ignorance in a negative way. I'm just saying, when we live a sedentary lifestyle, or a lifestyle that we're not really paying attention to what we're doing to our body, when we introduce yoga, it shows us exactly what we've done to our body over many years. And I think this is why people stray away from doing a yoga practice, is because then they start to see how bad their hips are, how tight their hamstrings are, how tight their shoulders are, how tight their back is, this and that and this and that and that. But when you're just getting up out of bed, going to take a shower, going to work, coming back and doing the things, you don't really notice the state that your body is in until you start getting older, when you're overtly dehydrated, the cartilage in your bone and your joints are wearing, your spine is compressing, and so you'll feel the aches and pains, but we ignore them, right? And so when we start going into the yoga practice, you can't ignore those things. When you are in pigeon posture, for example, just look up pigeon posture. That posture alone will tell you everything about your body. Or if it's forward folds, or if it's side bends, or if it's warrior postures. The yoga practice is so good at showing you exactly what you've done to it. And that's why I love it, because even in 14 years of doing this practice, I'm still going through stuff. Like I have an old injury in my left hamstring, and I find that just generally my left hip is tighter than my right hip. And so there's days where it feels really great and really open, and then there's days where it's super tight and I have to spend a lot of time with it. But moving from asana to pranayama is this step into understanding now the subtleties of your practice and the subtleties of how your body works. And this is why I take this into the realm of science, because the yamas and the yamas are showing you how to prepare for your seated practice by developing a character. You're developing a demeanor, and you're developing how to be in the world, so that when you do sit down, you can be prepared to deal with the things that come up internally, right? So if you are living in the world and you don't care about anything, you're harming people, you're stealing, you're cheating, you're lying, you have no control of your energy, you're all over the place, you are grasping and having grudges and holding on to things and so on and so forth. When you sit down to do your practice and stuff starts to come up, if you're that type of person where you're overtly negative like that, and now you're sitting down and you have to deal with what ruminates in your mind, there's no way you're going to even want to sit down with yourself. There's no way you're going to want to be in silence, move your body, do breath work, do meditation, because all that stuff's going to come up and you're not going to want to deal with it. You're going to immediately run away. You're going to get up and you're going to be like, screw this. I'm out of here. I don't want to deal with all this. And so the yamas and yamas are the precursor to then doing your asana practice. Then from your asana practice, then into your pranayama and your breath work. And now, in a scientific way, you're going from dealing with the physical bulk of your body, of moving your body in a way where you're working your connective tissues and muscles, and you're working with your organs and hips and so forth, where the pranayama practice is now dealing with the energetics of your body. It now has to do with your lung capacity first and foremost, because there's a whole host of breathing techniques that really deal with inhaling as deep as you can, exhaling out, and breathing rapidly, breathing softly, and so on. And then all of that having to work with your nervous system. And so the importance of pranayama and breath work is that we're taking the subconscious autonomic breath rate. So just like right now. So if you were to put your attention on your breath and how you're breathing, it's typically naturally shallow. Your body just inhales and exhales. You don't have to think about it. It's just happening. But it's a lot of shorter chest breaths. But what you can do with your breath that's different than anything else in your body that is autonomic. So like you can't on the fly change your heart rate. You can't on the fly change how your blood is flowing. You can't on the fly change how your organs are working or your endocrine system and your hormones. There are just things in the body that are happening that your conscious mind and your somatic nervous system just can't change. But your breath rate can. So your breath rate can go from autonomic to somatic, where you can take a deep inhale in and it's deliberate. You're making that choice. You can hold your breath. Then you can exhale everything out. And so where the scientific view of it comes in is that the pranayama practice is to take the breath from the autonomic, and autonomic just means like kind of subconscious or unconscious operation, to the more conscious somatic operation, where now you're introducing more oxygen to your body. So when you take a deep inhale in and you count for 10 seconds, then you exhale everything out, 10 seconds, inhale for 10 seconds, exhale for 10 seconds, inhale for 10 seconds, exhale. And you do this for 10 minutes. You will noticeably feel different because your brain and your body, your blood, your nervous system is getting more oxygen than it normally would in those 10 seconds, because your autonomic system is only taking in enough oxygen to operate your body in the way that it does in its beta state. And so when you start to increase the amount of oxygen, you're increasing oxygen into your blood, into your brain, into your muscles, into your connective tissues, and into your nervous system. So your nervous system operates on oxygen as well. So when you sit cross-legged and your legs go numb, what's happening is that the nerves are getting cut off from oxygen. And so they're not getting the signaling. And so they start to slow down. And that tingling feeling is the slowing down of the nervous signaling until there's so much of a lack of oxygen that there's no more signaling going. And as soon as you open your legs and you move your legs and then you start getting that tingling sensation back, is because oxygen is coming back into the nervous system. And so when we do the breath work, where either we're doing a particular breathing technique where we're changing the rate of breath, like what I was just saying, inhale for 10 seconds, hold for 2 seconds, exhale for 10 seconds, hold for 2 seconds. We are changing the cycle of breathing, which is going to change the brain state. And this is all proven scientifically. I'm going to look for this stuff and put it in the link in the bio, in the description, so you can see it for yourself. And these are studies that are in the national archives, like the NCIS, right? Or yes. Or NCIB, I think, NCIB. NCIS is like a TV show or something. I think it's NCIB. And so when we are changing our breathing pattern, we will, and you will, notice a difference in how your body is operating. And so the pranayama side, and if we're taking the svadhyaya element of the yamas and niyamas, is that in the self-study with pranayama, we are looking at just how exactly the shifts are being made in changing our breathing rate. And athletes are taught this, boxers are taught this, that if they want to survive 10 rounds of getting punched in the head, that you need breath control. You need to be able to control your heart rate. And you need to be able to ensure that when your heart rate increases, that your breath rate doesn't get affected by the increase in heart rate, because you can't really totally control your heart rate. If you are a runner and you are running long distance, say 10 kilometers, your heart's going to be pounding and pounding and pounding. But through that increased heart rate, you can train yourself to continue a particular breath rate where you're inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the nose, inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the nose. And what is always avoided is rapid inhale and exhale through the mouth, because then that can lead to hyperventilate and other issues, right? And so even the yogis from thousands of years ago knew the importance of controlling your breath and what that does. And in this case, it's actually wildly different than just controlling your breath so that you can run 10 kilometers. The realm of breath work and breath control here is to specifically prepare yourself for a level of meditation, a level of enlightenment. And this is all where this is leading to, is how we can prepare ourselves so that when we do finally sit down to meditate, when we do finally sit down to go into ourselves, that there's a pathway. And that pathway is built through pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And this is really the most, I think, important part of all of this, is that the yamas and niyamas, asana and pranayama, are simply preparation. But here in the West, because of Pattabhi Jois and BKS Iyengar and Bikram, is that they emphasized the exercise. They emphasized the asana and pranayama part, and that we become obsessed with the movement part, that we don't realize that those are just the precursors for preparing to enter into deeper states of meditation. And just look how yoga classes are designed, right? Like you have an hour to do a yoga class. And even if you have an hour and a half, it's really just to do the movement. And what's so the thing, obviously I have a bias here, but I mean, I'm at the whim of it as well. I teach in a yoga studio. I love it. My classes are an hour long. I would love for them to be 2 hours long, but that's just not how things work. So to stay on track here, now when we're looking into Pratyahara, Dharana, and Dhyana and Samadhi, is that we're utilizing the first 8 limbs to prepare ourselves for what meditation truly is. Personally, my understanding of what meditation is in the world today, of like meditation apps and meditation videos on YouTube or whatever, is not even meditation. And it's kind of challenging to get people to understand this, because the view of meditation is just so kind of elementary, where what is explained or what is taught is like, oh yeah, meditation is to ease anxiety and to calm the mind, to quiet the mind. And, you know, there's apps to do like 5-minute meditations and 10-minute meditations and 20-minute meditations. But like, that's not meditation. And it's challenging to really explain this, but what these apps are doing and what majority of the world meditations are doing are only the beginning stages of Pratyahara. So it's the beginning stages of sense withdrawal. And so when you sit there and you're trying to quiet the mind and you're trying to calm yourself, you're trying to focus, that's not even meditation. And the interesting thing about the word meditation is that in the context of these practices, like specifically these yoga practices, the word meditation is fairly new. I'm just going to look this up for a second. Gotta go into Google. My laptop defaults to Bing, and it just Bing sucks for searching things. So, the word meditation, the term to meditate, originates from the Latin word meditatum, which means to ponder. And it was monk Giogo II who introduced this terminology for the first time in the 12th century AD. So I just want to repeat that because I want to make a video of this. The term to meditate originates from the Latin word meditatum, which means to ponder, and it was coined by monk Giogo, I think that's how you say it, Guigo II, and he introduced this term for the first time in the 12th century AD. And so what we know of meditation isn't actually what meditation is. And so this monk was a Christian monk, I think out of France, and it was to ponder the word of God and to get a sense of what the Bible was saying and to ponder these things. And so when you say, oh, I'm going to sit down to meditate, for the most part, people don't even know what that word means. I'm going to sit down to ponder. To ponder what? Oh, I'm going to ponder the emptiness of nothing. I'm going to ponder stilling my mind. And they don't even really even think that that's what that means, because the term meditation was co-opted and put into a system that didn't even have the word meditate. Like when you look at the yamas and niyamas, Ashtanga yoga, you have pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Those four are part of a whole system in getting into a deeper state of consciousness and awareness, where to meditate, to ponder, is way at the beginning of these things. And so what I've seen in the world of like yoga and whatnot, people try to put meditation in with dhyana, but dhyana is so far beyond meditation and to ponder. And so to me, meditation is in more so the self-study, the svadhyaya, the examination of yourself and the examination of text. So really, meditation has nothing to do with what dharana and dhyana and samadhi are. And again, I'll reiterate, meditation only really has to do with svadhyaya and self-study and the study of text, because it says it right here. The term meditate originates from the Latin word meditatum, which means to ponder, and to ponder the Bible. So really, to ponder is to have a sense of self-study. And I want this to blow up. Like, I want this to be understood by people. I want to go on as many podcasts as possible and saying, you're not meditating. Meditating isn't even a thing. What you're doing is you're exploring dharana and dhyana. You're exploring a new state of consciousness, and meditation isn't it. That's my rant on that. Let's continue on with dharana, dhyana, samadhi here. So with pratyahara, sense withdrawal, taking it into the science of things, is you're literally taking in the energy from your peripheral nervous system into your central nervous system to withdraw the senses. And it's at that point where then all of that energy that's drawn in, you're concentrating through dharana, and then you are focusing up and into through dhyana, so that you can open up into samadhi in a greater state of consciousness. And that sounds great, doesn't it? It's just a bunch of words, but there is a process to this, and there is an experience that comes out of it. And there are a numerous amount of texts that detail what those experiences are. And there's names for them, like Nirvikalpa Samadhi, right? So this is what I love about the world of yoga, is that not only in Patanjali Sutras and Ashtanga Yoga, there are so many other yogis that have come out with great works that really detail the inner practices. There was an episode that I did when I was going through, it was at least a couple episodes when I was going through the Pranavayus, where I was going into the Geranda Samhita. So I'll link this one as well, so you can take a look at it. But essentially, the Geranda Samhita is a text that is a response to a conversation between Geranda and I think his wife, and they basically detail really intricate and specifically intricate pranayama practices and what they are preparing you for. And so this is where I feel this is like my job as a yogi, not so much as to teach yoga, but to bring light to these texts and bring light to the works of past yogis. And so that you as a listener, if you're wanting to get into these things, that you're getting into yoga on the right path. And to be able to take on the practice in a way where it's not about following a teacher. And I think this is where I kind of want to end this thing, because I'm such a big advocate for anti-cults. Like, don't join a yoga cult. Don't join a cult whatsoever. It's not worth it. You can learn all this stuff through past teachers who are dead, and you don't have to worry about having to deal with any of the bullshit of some random dude who wants you to follow him and give up everything in your life. So I'm like hugely anti-cult. And so my job is to say, you know what? There's the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. There's the Gadanda Samhita. There's Yogananda and all his work. Yogananda is absolutely amazing. If there is one living teacher I'd say to follow, it's Yogrishi Vishvaketu, Vishvaji. He's my teacher. He's got Akhanda Yoga Institute. It is fantastic. He is very much the same in like anti-cult. He just he tells people straight up, he's like, I don't need any followers. Don't follow me. I see everybody as friends, and continue living your life. Don't give up your life for me. I don't care about that. And it's like relieving, because I've definitely have interacted with other teachers who did the opposite, and they wanted you to give up everything to be with them. And that is not good. Bit of a rant there, but finding these practices that suit you, I think, is the important thing here. So regardless of what like yoga school you're going through, I think if you can have the discernment where you're not becoming obsessed with the person leading it, and instead you are getting into the older texts from yogis who did this work on their own and with their gurus, and are really brilliant about it, is going to help you out so much more than I think some random dude today will. Like I was saying, Yogananda and his lineage is really good. So I'd say, getting the autobiography of a yogi, getting the Holy Science, getting the Bhagavad Gita, transliterated by Yogananda. What else? The Bihar school. So Shivananda's, school has amazing books. So from the Bihar library, they have the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. They have a book on pranayama. They have a book on Kundalini and Tantra. They have translations of some of the old texts. Another more kind of like obscure but kind of popular yogi from the past is Sri Aurobindo. And who else? There was a poet. I'm going to look up his name right now. Oh, yeah. Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore was a poet, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. He was a Bengali poet, writer, playwright, composer, philosopher, social reformer, and painter. And yeah, so he's like contemporary. He's kind of modern. He was around in the early 1900s. So there's a lot of good sources of, Indian mystics and poets and scholars who did a lot of good for the yoga world and brought clarity to older texts. And in that way, you can kind of avoid the kind of like Western bastardization of yoga, because there's too many people who make a name for themselves and they become really popular because they were, they kind of grew up as a gymnast or an athlete, and they got into yoga, and because they're just already flexible, they do a teacher training, and then they kind of blow up on social media, and they have hundreds of thousands of followers, and then they somehow become like this spokesperson for yoga, and then they just turn all their works into their business, right? So it's like finding a book about the chakras there's like dime a dozen, but when you get into it, it's all the same stuff, right? And it's like everybody's in that world are writing books about what how do I want to say it? It's like what their interpretation of the wisdom of yoga is, right? And you can find those books anywhere. And the thing that, obviously I'm going to have like my criticism of that stuff, but if you're a beginner and you find that stuff and that's what gets you into the yoga world, that's great. And then the next level is like, okay, now have the discernment to go beyond that stuff and look for the traditional writings of it. And so then, you can kind of step away from this world of cultural appropriation, right? Because, we're still very much in that level of criticism where if you're taking on a yoga practice and you're wanting to teach and you're wanting to benefit from it, like I get paid for teaching yoga, right? And so if you want to step away from or kind of not be hindered by the criticism of cultural appropriation, is then to go into the traditional workings of it. And if you really are wanting to get into the path of yoga, if this is a calling for you and you're like, you know what, I want to deepen my practice, I want to start teaching, I want to turn my life into a life of yoga, then the next step is finding a yoga school. Like I said, I'm biased. I would recommend Akanda Yoga Institute and Rishi Vishvaketu. I'll have links to all that stuff in this episode. And go to India and see what it's like there. And be a part of a yoga school that does a lot of good work for their community. And so then, when you go to do a training, you're not doing a training with some white chick who's charging you $3,500 and it's out of some random studio, and all the money basically is going to her and another teacher, and you don't know what kind of lifestyle that they live, right? And so I've seen teachers all throughout my whole kind of career as a yogi where they're showing up to their yoga classes hungover, or they bring McDonald's with them. And so there's like, there's the ones that you can see that it's like, oh, they're not actually doing this because they're wanting to live the yogic lifestyle. They're doing it because it's a job, like they got the training because they were like, oh, I can't do this sport anymore. I can't do this thing anymore. So I'm going to do a yoga training, and I can get paid well, because you actually get paid very well teaching yoga classes. So between teaching yoga classes, teaching workshops, teaching trainings, doing retreats, you can make a good amount of money. And so there's this draw towards that, right? And So if you're really wanting to get into what it means to live a yogic lifestyle, you have to see that, yes, there is a business side to it, and there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you know what you're contributing to and what that money is for, right? Like, I have a full-time job, and so the money that I get from my full-time job pays for my rent, pays for my bill, pays for my car, pays for my groceries. Perfect. Then I teach yoga 3 days a week. That money is saved. I'm putting that money away, and that goes towards either other yoga stuff. Say if I'm planning to go to India next year, right? So next winter, then that money goes into the ashram, into my teacher's ashram. So there's things to consider, and I don't want to keep ranting about this stuff because I can just go on and on and on. I'm already at the 1 hour mark. But yeah, to kind of just wrap this up, finding a good school, super important. That school then, contributes to the community, like Vishwaji and his ashrams and his trainings and everything that he does. He has a school for children that particularly the enrollment is geared towards girls, because in the villages around where his school is, a lot of the times the girls are just sold off. Like a lot of those more traditional Indian families, the level of poverty is so high that in order for their family to survive, they have to sell their 8-year-old girl to someone in a city. And so Vishwaji is taking these girls in and giving them an education and giving them an opportunity to show up in the world, especially in India, where they can go to a post-secondary school, that they can go and contribute greater than just, being a servant or being sold off or whatever, right? And so that's why I feel good about being a student of Vishwaji's, being a student of Akhanda Yoga, teaching the Akhanda Yoga lineage, and contributing to that. So I'm going to try to remember all the links that I said that I'll put out there. But links on like Ashtanga yoga stuff, some texts, the Akhanda yoga stuff, and my website, and where to find my book, Future Life Progression, Meeting Your Future Self, and my music will be all up in there. So thank you for listening. I think I went a little bit deeper on some of the stuff, but that's totally fine. That's just how I do things. So the next episodes are going to be individual episodes on the yamas and niyamas and asana and pranayama and the 8 limbs. So the next episodes can all be about ahimsa, how to take on ahimsa as a practice, what it looks like in various stages of experience. So non-harm of, physical non-harm, emotional non-harm, mental non-harm, spiritual non-harm, and how that fits into the world that we're in. I'm going to look at some advocates of ahimsa like Gandhi and his approach and what that did for India, and Yogananda as well. And yeah, it's gonna be a lot of really good information. I'm super excited about it. Again, thank you for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy.